Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're happy to have you here today for our presentation on supplier diversity, featuring Doris Carson Williams and Belinda Matthews Stenson. Before I turn the program over to our presenters, we do have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentations, we will have time for questions, which you can ask using the questions function of the webinar, and you'll find that question box on the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and you can just type your questions, and I'll read the questions to our presenters. If we run out of time or don't get to your question, we'll contact you after the webinar. Or if you have a question that you would prefer to ask offline, please feel free to contact one of our presenters directly. Their contact information will be included in the presentation. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the ACCE website on the ACCE University webinar page later this week. In addition, the webinar presentation slides are uploaded to the webinar panel on the right-hand side of your computer screen. I'll be doing that. So we'll also have those presentations available to download with the recording of the presentation after today's presentation. Before we begin, I wanted to take a few moments to introduce our presenters. Doris Carson Williams is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the African American Chamber of Commerce of Western Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The African American Chamber of Commerce of Western Pennsylvania provides access to and promotes opportunities for minority-owned and small businesses. It is one of the nation's largest African American chambers of commerce with more than 500 business owners and professionals. Doris started the organization in 1998. Prior to launching the African American Chamber of Commerce of Western Pennsylvania, Ms. Carson Williams had held multiple leadership positions in other organizations, including Hartford Insurance, Control Data Corporation, Dollar Bank, and Carnegie Museums. Doris is the Vice Chair of the Highmark Foundation, serves on the board of Highmark Health Services, and is a member of the International Women's Forum. She also serves on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and was appointed by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to serve as a member of the Court of Judicial Discipline and serves as its president. Belinda Matthews Stenson is the Director for Minority Business Partnership for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. In this role, she is responsible for leading the Chamber's efforts to grow the 9-county Miami Valley region's economy and to strengthen area minority businesses. She champions this initiative by advocating for increased minority business participation, facilitating strategic business relations, and leveraging the talents of minority businesses in the area. The Minority Business Partnership Initiative supports the Chamber's buy local strategy by assisting purchasing organizations to keep more spend locally by connecting buyers with capable MBE suppliers. Belinda spent over 20 years with NCR Corporation, where she served in various leadership roles in areas of finance and accounting, human resources, ethics and compliance, Six Sigma quality, and business operations. After a successful NCR career, Belinda launched a small business management consulting firm. Prior to joining the Chamber management team, Belinda served as Executive Director for the Omega Community Development Corporation. So before our presenters begin, I'm going to show a brief video that they asked us to show. So you should be seeing my screen now, and I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. And good afternoon, everyone. When you think of supplier diversity, and I'm giving you this from my standpoint, and I'll talk more about how I got to where this is. Supplier diversity is a business strategy that helps to ensure a diverse supplier base of procurement of goods and services for any business or organization. It emphasizes the creation of a diverse supply chain that helps to work through the daily needs of a company. In other words, supplier diversity refers to a supply chain that incorporates businesses owned by a diverse individual or group. The next slide. So what it is, as I was saying, it's a proactive business strategy. And this strategy is one that many companies have moved closer to. They have embraced the strategy and the concept because it helps to encourage the use of diverse suppliers, both for goods and services for any business or organization. Let me emphasize the fact that it makes good business sense to do this. And companies have applauded the initiative in many parts of the country because they're finding supplier diversity strengthens their region. And that's what I want to impress upon each of you as chamber executives. It helps to strengthen your region and grow the small business network for which you're incorporated in. So the creation of a diverse supply chain simply means that it works to secure the inclusion of diverse groups in the procurement plans for not only government, but for nonprofits and private industry. Next slide. When you think of supplier diversity, there is an initial impact and importance to it, and what I've tried to capture here for you is who does the program support? There are about 16 categories, but these are the ones most focused upon. Veteran-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, disabled-owned business enterprises, minority-owned business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises, the LGBTE community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, historically underutilized businesses or the hub zones, small businesses, and other disadvantaged business enterprises. So you can see it incorporates a broad spectrum of small business owners, all of which, or 90% are probably in your region, and this is just to highlight how you can tap into it. This program really does matter. It matters for all because it helps to reinforce the commitment to excellence, which as chamber execs is what you want to help do, and create affordable services. Many companies, as you know, often think of major corporations in their area use only large suppliers. This is a perfect opportunity for large corporations to partner small and minority businesses through one of the certifications listed to help them grow not only their business, but to help support the region. So it's most reflective in the communities in which you serve. You can better connect customers with suppliers who address specific strategic needs, and we will be spelling those out as we move forward. It helps to increase competition, to decrease costs for goods and services by corporations. Oftentimes, small business owners have been told they weren't necessarily the cheapest or someone else wasn't the least expensive. This is an opportunity for a small business owner to come in and actually actively bid on a project and identify their strengths to help grow their company and help grow the region for the business. It allows for a competitive advantage in pursuit of government business, and also aligns with key strategic initiatives that take place. How do you launch? Could you go to the next slide? If you look at how to engage through implementation, and my associate Stephanie is going to talk more about this in her presentation, you need to look at a company and learn to work with them by doing some research and homework on your part. If they don't have one set up, here's 6 things you can look at to help them to engage one. Look at their company website. See what kind of contacts they have that you can learn about their program and the types of minority businesses or disadvantaged businesses or supplier diversity that they may have. Most companies have a website where you can log on to them and actually register your business. So that's what you want to encourage businesses in your area to do. Go on a company's website, log in, input all their information in their profile so that they can move forward. It's always helpful to send a brief introduction. That could be through an email to the head of the program. One-page statement, almost like your elevator speech, to talk about your company, what the company does, and how you procure your goods and services, the opportunities that you're presenting to them. I always suggest scheduling a call with their supplier diversity lead person. You can ask for 15 minutes for the call, and obviously you get more than 15 minutes, you've scored a home run because it gets to be of interest. But most effective is that face-to-face call with the supplier diversity person that hopefully has meetings on a regular basis, or you can help to set one up with them. A lot of companies have these once a month, and I'll talk more about that. You also want to be in position to attend a company outreach event to learn more about their program. The next slide, please. How do you measure success? And let me share something. I neglected to put all of the details in on the screen, but I am the chair of Supplier Diversity for Highmark Health in Western Pennsylvania. What that means is I work with their team of their director and their managers on supplier diversity, and we meet on a regular basis to go over not only the activity level that they have, but what kinds of companies are they working with, how they're tracking it, and it's equally important if you read through some of this, you have to have the proper software in place to begin to track that kind of information. If you have 5 different categories, you should track, each one should be tracked separately. You want to help a company to understand the value in that. Many of them have to do government reporting. They have to respond to what kind of minority or small business participation they have at their company. And this affords them the opportunity to do that. Just remember, the type of software that's used oftentimes can prove what is most effective. And that's why I have Highmark at the corner, because I want to show you on the next slide, and you can go to the next slide. This is a sample of what I helped Highmark to create to track their diverse spend. They do this on a regular basis, and what we look at is what is the overall spend that a company has. From that overall spend, how how do they break it down into the individual categories in their area? You may not have each area in your region or through your chamber, but you probably have 5 of them. Whatever, you want to be able to track the spend out of the total spend. Keep track of that, what we call Tier 2, which is, in this case, construction and design direct suppliers. We track this over a period of time so that we could not only tell the board, but share with the public. Here's what the dollar spend has been for the company. It's important for small business owners because that tells them the value and the commitment that a company has to supplier diversity. Help set up some key gross supply measurements so that you can track each one of these individually. Minority, small businesses, and help them set up the category if they don't have it. Their veterans category, and then their women and LBGT categories. It's important to track these because I said on a regular basis, and it may be annually or it may be quarterly. They have to track this information to share this not only with government, but with other entities in which they work. The next slide. There are many ways that a company needs support. And as a chamber manager and executive, we can be very helpful to them. How is doing a number of different initiatives. We can serve as the champion for them, or as I like to say, we're the advocate for diversity championship and trusted advisor for their stakeholders. They need to report back both public and private companies on how well they are doing this. Companies that have fallen behind and may not have been as successful in tracking diversity spend are finding in their areas that this has caused them some downfalls on what is helping their region to go. You want to be the ambassador and the person that really helps them build their company and help to sustain your region. You want to speak to the stakeholders, talk about the pipeline and the corresponding actions to be taken. And here in Western Pennsylvania, we do an annual membership directory, as I'm sure most of you do. Share it with them. If they're not in there, help them get in there. Tell them the benefit of being part of your organized body so that they can come in and actually do something through the pipeline and track the corresponding action plans that are necessary. Meeting diverse spend goals is critical for a company, and it also helps to strengthen you as a chamber executive because you will have played a key role in this. One of the things here in Western Pennsylvania that we do is we follow the Rooney Rule. And I think all of you know the Rooney Rule that was started by the head of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is that every single level position had to include a minority in the selection process. In this case, following the Rooney Rule, you want to make sure that there's a small business owner in one of the categories or the one that is primary in your region for helping to get selected. Help them set up, if you can, how to do business workshops. Those go a long way. That's where your membership can go into a company, meet their procurement managers and key decision makers, get some face time. I guess it's not appropriate today for us to say shake hands, but get some face time where they get to talk with them. Find out about their company because, as we all know, relationships matter. So once you have a relationship, then you can be invited in to come in and talk with procurement officers, talk about your product and services because no one can market them better than you, and possibly invite a business owner in as a speaker talk about the value of a diverse, supplier diverse program. Customizing the company event to introduce diverse suppliers is always a plus. If you can play a role in that for a company as a chamber exec, I think it's most helpful. The executive key decision makers oftentimes appreciate that type of support because you know the role that small businesses play in your region. What you're trying to do is foster better behavior for that company. And in your case, it could also be for your chamber to get a more diverse group of business owners in to do business with your organization. Next slide. What distinguishes a good supplier diversity program? It's being engaged, knowing what is happening, you having done your homework, present the information and be dynamic, present a robust conversation about supplier diversity, and give some examples to show what happens if they expand their network, what happens if they're a little bit more innovative. But most importantly, what really makes the difference is you. You make the difference for how things work. Next slide. And in conclusion, from my standpoint, this is what you do in pursuit of excellence. You want to help a company to grow, you want to help your chamber grow, you want to be the advocate, but most importantly, you want to strengthen small business within your region because it makes good business sense. I thank you for your attention, and let me turn it over to Amy.
Great. Thank you so much, Doris. I just want to remind everyone as I am switching over to Belinda's presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and put those into the chat box, in the question box. Either box is fine. Go ahead and jot down those questions, and we will ask those after Belinda does her presentation. So, Belinda, I think we're ready for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Doris, for laying the foundation for my conversation. The Minority Business Partnership started under the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce's umbrella about almost 10 years ago. In October 2020, we will celebrate 10 years under the Chamber's umbrella. Prior to that time, it was a grassroots organization that was funded, that was housed, that was supported by our Dayton Foundation, which is a very influential, very powerful organization in the Dayton region. So in 2009, the community asked Dr. Melvin Gravely out of Cincinnati, to come to the Dayton area to help put a framework in place for that grassroots effort. So Dr. Gravely came into our community, he did his research and his analysis, and they wanted him to identify several things. First of all, where should this initiative be housed? Secondly, help with the framework, because the conversations had begun with the corporate executives, with some of the larger minority-owned businesses, CEOs. So when Dr. Gravely came into the community, he looked at a number of areas. He looked at the Dayton Chamber. He looked at some of the universities. He looked at one of our economic development organizations. And Dr. Gravely immediately said, it belongs at the Dayton Area Chamber. It was very similar to a model that he had worked with in Cincinnati, which was at the Cincinnati Regional Chamber, in Cleveland, which was at the partnership in Cleveland, and he had done some other frameworks outside of the state of Ohio. So 10 years ago, we started the Minority Business Partnership at the Dayton Area Chamber. You'll see on my slide, I have 2010 to 2020, a decade of leadership. So we have started planning for a big celebration in October of this year. When you talk to people that were around 10 years ago when this decision was made, the CEO, for one, of the chamber thought this is something that we could do in 2 or 3 years and we could move on to the next initiative. Not so quickly. So what I want to do today is to give you an overview of the journey over the last 10 years with the Minority Business Partnership. And I'll start with a video. It's very simple. It does not have any sound. So Amy, you're not missing any sound. This video does not have any sound, and it will play twice because it's so short. I want to make sure that you understand what the initial role was for the Minority Business Partnership. So Amy, you can move to the next slide and start the video. Okay, it's starting the second round. The same information. Just wanted to make sure that you were really able to capture what our initial goal was for the Minority Business Partnership. Okay, thank you. Amy, you can move to the next slide. So let me share with you a document that I deem priceless. When Dr. Gravely put together the binder of all of the information, the analysis, the research, I came on board in 2012. So the initiative had been in place at the Chamber for 2 years. The first document they gave me was a binder from Dr. Gravely saying, here's your roadmap. I read the information, fell asleep on it. The next day, tried to read it again until I came across what I call our roadmap. This was from Dr. Gravely saying these are the key things that you need to do in order to put the Minority Business Partnership framework together. When you look at the left-hand side, you see input. There are 3 primary important pillars of the Minority Business Partnership. In order for it to be successful, you had to have minority-owned businesses. You had to have corporate buy-in organizations. And the third component, we were going to partner with the existing business organizations, business support organizations that were already in place. So MVP was not to be a duplication or a conflict or in competition with anything that existed. So when you talk about the process, what were the key critical activities that we wanted to put in place? If you look inside the circle, you'll see the green bubble that talks about improved culture and the environment. The purple talks about connecting and building relationships. The third, the red, introducing and tracking and reporting within our region. And then to build inclusion capacity. So I'll talk about each of those areas as we move forward. But what he saw as the outcomes, we would have new business relationships, our minority-owned businesses would grow and they would be able to handle larger projects. And in general, it would grow our region. It would be a more vibrant Dayton region. And I can remember Dr. Gravely saying when I came on board, he said, Belinda, if this is done right, it will change the way your neighborhoods look. It will change the way your communities look. It'll change your schools. It will change the greater Dayton region. Next slide. Okay, so our corporate partners, we call them CBOs. Dr. Gravely said in this framework that he put together, he said if you have 20 large committed buying organizations doing business with 40 large scalable minority-owned businesses, you could create that vibrant economy that I talked about earlier. So what you see on this slide, you see all of our CBOs that sit down with us on a regular basis. They provide metrics. The way that you're able to get into the partnership as a CBO, the CEO of your organization has to sign what we call a commitment letter. And it's a gentleman's agreement. And it talks about that the CEO and their organization, they will be a champion for supplier diversity, not just in their organization, but throughout the region. They will assign high-level individuals to at least 3 of our councils. We have a leadership council. We have a purchasing roundtable where the chief procurement officer sits. And we also have a facilities construction committee, which is more focused on construction and committees. So for each of these organizations, we have 3 high-level individuals that are engaged with supplier diversity. And keep in mind the supplier diversity, if the company has a supplier diversity director or manager, that person too is engaged. Next slide, Gloria. I'm sorry, next slide, Amy. And just to talk about the CBOs, currently we have 29 committed buying organizations that are active. So we've exceeded that number of 20 that Dr. Gravely talked about. With our minority-owned businesses, Dr. Gravely was very, very intentional. He did not plan or did not recommend that we start with startups, smaller companies. These were companies that would be able to handle large projects from our committed buying organizations. The criteria for what we're calling our Focus 40 companies, because he said 20 large committed buying organizations doing business with 40 large scalable minority-owned businesses. They had to have at least $500,000 in revenue. And keep in mind, this was 10 years ago. We've not changed it. But I would say 99% of our companies, they're multi-million-dollar companies. They had to be located in our 9-county region, and they had to have a product or service that we could align with the needs of our corporate buying organizations. Next slide, Doris. Amy. Okay, thank you. The third pillar that we talked about, partnering and aligning and collaborating with other organizations in our region that work with minority-owned businesses. You'll see I have ACCE on the list, our Entrepreneur Center, Jumpstart. We've been working with them for the last 2.5 years. The Ohio Minority Supplier Development Council, which is the Ohio affiliate of the NMSDC, our Small Business Development Center, SBA, the Minority Business Assistance Center, and several other organizations in our community. I emphasize this because taking on a supplier diversity program, you cannot do it all. We have to have our lane. Okay, next slide. We have been doing supplier diversity for almost 10 years. And it took me probably 5 or 6 years to work on the metrics. Initially, when I came on board, only 2 of our companies could report metrics. Today, I'm really excited that all 29 of our companies report metrics. When we first started, we were reporting metrics quarterly. And keep in mind, that's all myself and my team did. We were collecting metrics from our committed buying organizations, as well as our Focus 40 companies. Today, we collect metrics annually from our corporate partners and annually from our large scalable minority-owned businesses. What I realized in 2015-16, that I was waiting on all of my other resource partners to develop these companies until they got to $500,000 or $1 million, and then I was expecting them to deliver them to me in a nice package with a beautiful bow. I found myself waiting. And then we realized we have to be very engaged in working with our resource partners to accelerate the growth of companies so that they could come into our Focus 40 portfolio. Our Focus 40 portfolio is seen as a very exclusive group of companies, but we needed to bring in other products, other services, other companies. One area that we had that was very difficult, I would get a call almost every week from one of my committed buying organizations looking for an MBE janitorial company. We had no janitorial companies in our portfolio. In 2017, we started working on a company. We now have a company that has grown overnight because we supported them. We accelerated their growth with certification, connecting them to our buying organizations, and helping to put the proper framework for that company. In 2017, we also became the inclusion partner for a state-funded grant, and it's very tech-enabled. So it moved us from what we were traditionally doing within the Minority Business Partnership, keep in mind, minority, large, scalable companies, to now we're dealing with tech startups, but we're the inclusion partner, and we are responsible for making sure that we have women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and rural firms in that portfolio of tech companies to make sure that the monies that are provided for that grant, all companies are able to take care, able to participate. 2 years ago, we were awarded a grant, the KeyBank Business Boost and Build grant. Jumpstart is the host of that grant, and they also facilitate that grant. With that grant, we have been able to really stay focused on our 3 strategies. When we talk about the challenges of minority, women-owned, rural, any business, it is access to capital, access to coaching and counseling, and access to customers. So the Jumpstart grant allowed us to further expand our reach so that we can continue to work with WBE, MBE, low to moderate income communities, as well as rural farms. We are able to work with a lot more Main Street businesses, businesses that we had never worked with before. And we're able to fast track them to our MVP Focus 40 portfolio. So when I talk about supplier diversity, we started Supplier Diversity. Supplier Diversity is truly our framework. We would not have been able to do the ESP or the KBB without having that solid foundation with the Minority Business Partnership. Next slide. So we talked about access to counseling, access to contracts, and access to capital. All 3 are so critical. The component that we've added since we got the KeyBank grant is access to recruitment, talent recruitment. In a survey that was done in our region recently, they asked small businesses what was one of the biggest challenges for them. And all of us thought they would say healthcare, taxes, but no. The number 1 challenge that most of our companies identified was the recruitment and retention of their workforce. So one of our grants has allowed us to look at workforce. Next slide. Beyond supplier diversity, it's so important that you're in tune to what's going on in your community, in your region. Right now, in our region, economic inclusion is a hot topic. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's trying to get engaged. What I realize, collaborations are critical to be effective and efficient. And I'll be the first to say, as the lead fiscal agent on the KBB grant, they're difficult. They're real. It takes a minute to really get engaged, to start working together. But we definitely believe we have a better product because of the partners that are at the table. We all have our lanes, we stay in our lanes, and at the end of the day, we're able to move companies from a startup level all the way to a Focus 40 level. And I call companies either your startup, scale up, or my Focus 40 companies, I call them grown-up companies. What we're seeing in our region, grants, funding projects, they have inclusion goals. Our Ohio Third Frontier project, it comes with inclusion goals for minority, women, and rural companies. Many of our projects, whether it's the hospitals or our educational institutions, any new construction projects, they have goals, not only for contractors, suppliers, but they also have workforce goals. And we're always at the table on those projects. It is important to really understand what resources are in your community. So if you ever get a chance, look at your asset mapping, look at who's doing what so that you can better align your supplier diversity program with the other resources in your community. And then finally, include access strategy for workforce development, talent alignment. Next slide. And I come back to Dr. Gravely's framework. Metrics, balanced roles, public accountability, consistency, and focus. This is what I use. It guides our day-to-day work here at the Minority Business Partnership at the Dayton Chamber. And I think that concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Belinda. I do have a couple of questions here, and for folks on the line, if you have additional questions, please feel free to go ahead and use that question box. The first question I have here is around, do the suppliers have to be members of the chamber?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. The question is, do the suppliers have to be members of the chamber?
In all cases, no, they do not. As a chamber executive, obviously, I encourage people to join the chamber. But when I look at what we have built in the case of Highmark Health, they're not all chamber members. Some of them have joined after the fact, but no, they are not all members. But we try and encourage them. The value of being part of an organized body is having access to sessions like we put on for small business owners.
And I'd like to respond too, very similar to Doris, but let me put this in context for the chambers on the line. The Minority Business Partnership, we are under the foundation of our chamber. So we're actually a 501c3 organization. And some of the tenets of being a part of the 501c3, you can't really mandate that the services that are provided for all the programs under our foundation, you can't demand, command, require them to have chamber membership. Most of my Focus 40 companies, absolutely. They're big enough, they're bold enough, they're bad enough. They were chamber members before MVP started, and they are chamber members. The ones that we have accelerated and they've reached the level, they joined the chamber. But we work with some small companies, and initially they may not be a chamber member. They may not be ready for a chamber membership. But we grow them, and when we feel like it's time that the networking, you can benefit from the healthcare benefit, we sit down and have that conversation with them. Some want to join immediately, and we're like, wait, just 1 minute, you're not there yet. Because the worst thing for me is to have someone join the chamber, pay their money, and they're not ready to take advantage of the opportunities.
Well,
Can
I just add one thing to what she's saying, and that is, for us, it is the value add for them to be chamber members.
Mm-hmm.
They are too small. They can't take advantage not only of our organized body, but they also probably cannot provide the level of goods and services and the quality that a large company like we have here is looking for. When companies come to us and to our events, I mean, I'm the advocate for the African American Chamber. We've got 580 members. We're the 10th largest in our region. They know of us, but then they get to see the work. And I'm sure Belinda has that happen in Dayton. Once they see the work you're doing, your work speaks for itself, and people will come to you. Maybe not that day, but they'll come to you and say, I want to be part of what you're doing.
Then I have a follow-up question for that. Has there ever been a time where it's come into tension if you're promoting a member or someone who's participating in your supplier diversity program who's not a member over someone who maybe is a member of the chamber already? Has that ever come into play for either of you?
It has for me, but we always give them 2 recommendations. We never list just one person in a in business industry category for goods and services. If we only have one in our membership, we share that with them. But we always give them more than one, even if we have to go outside our network.
Likewise with us, they have the roster of our companies. Many times they'll come and say, we're looking for a catering company. Can you give me some names? And I'll tell them, we don't have a catering company in our Focus 40, but these are catering companies that we use, that some of the other corporations use. So we'll give them the list, and then it's up to the company to decide. We don't
Exactly.
This one is a chamber member, this one is not a chamber member. But if we've had experience and exposure to them, we can kind of say, oh, they do really, really good catering. Give comments like that. But no, I've never had to say, this is a chamber member, this isn't a chamber member.
Right. I have a question here about how you interact with and work with the certifying partners, whether they're public sector or third party. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with those other organizations?
We have here in Western Pennsylvania, and this is Doris, we have Allegheny County government who helped to set up the certifying arm, and I was a member of that for small businesses. We will refer people to them if a company needs certification, but we don't certify, nor do we try and stand in the way of that. That becomes the responsibility of another organization, and we're there to be of support.
For me, certification is key.
I mean, you gotta have
it. Here again, not all companies are ready for certification. But in order for my corporate buying organizations, when they report to me, they have to report only certified businesses. If they're going to report in the woman-owned business, it has to be a certified woman-owned business. If they're reporting for a minority, it has to be a certified minority-owned business, certified by a third party. I refer our companies to different certifying agencies. And I always tell a company, I want to meet with you, sit down with you, and then give you a recommendation. We have a City of Dayton certification. We, as I mentioned, the OMSDC certification. We have ORV, the women's certification. We have state certification, MBE, and socially disadvantaged business. We sit down with companies, and depending on who they want to work with, depending on if they're interested in a Procter & Gamble or Kroger, I'm going to send them straight to the Minority Supplier Development Company, Council, because they are in that lane. If they just want to do business with the City of Dayton, I'm going to send them to the City of Dayton to get that certification. But certification Certification is key for us, and we really spend a lot of time coaching and counseling companies about certification.
Certification is key for us, but let me share with you, I guess, and I'm kind of touting this. Western Pennsylvania has a unified certification program, so you don't have to go city, state, and county. But what it also means is we have had a number of companies join our chamber membership, and they're not interested in being certified. They are now at a level that they may be $3 or $4 million in sales, and I simply refer them to being able to sit down with that corporate leader, discuss their capabilities, but most important, look at the tiered level, and I encourage all of you to go on my website, www.aaccwp.com. Go on our website and look at that company's name and see what they pay in membership dues, because it's listed by category. If they're in the chairman's circle, that lets you know they've got capacity. That lets you know that they're at a level that maybe you can afford to do business with them and not look at it. But she's right. Certification is key, especially for small business owners.
And then very quickly, I have one last question here before we wrap up. Belinda, I know that you mentioned how you take advantage of resources like the Small Business Development Center. Has the Chamber created any programs to assist small businesses as they scale up or build capacity to get ready to be part of a supplier diversity program? Could you each just quickly touch on anything that you're doing to help Chamber or to help companies build that capacity?
We have quite a few councils and workshops and seminars that really focus on helping businesses scale up, regardless of whether you're a minority, a woman, or rural, or low to moderate income. We help companies navigate through some of the challenges of their workforce development, their talent management. We have breakfast briefings where we have corporate CEOs come in and they talk about what the strategy is, what the long-term vision. But I would say everything that we do in the chamber is positioned to help businesses grow.
Our mission is to continuously improve business opportunities for African American business owners and professionals and our diverse membership base.
And Amy, if I could kind of wrap up my piece with, you know, people ask why is this important? Why is business ownership important? You're hearing a lot of folks talk about equity now. You know, what does equity mean? But when I participated in the ACCE Enterprise presentation, and I went on their website and I pulled their annual report. And if you've not seen it, please get it. It's so valuable. The one thing that really struck me, one of the metrics, one of the data points that said Black families who own a business have 8 times the net worth of Black families who do not. Similarly, Latinx families that own a business have 4 times the net worth of Latinx families who do not. To me, that was so impactful to talking about disparities, the wealth gap, the income gap, equity. We have to be very intentional about making sure that our minority, women-owned, our diverse businesses have the necessary support that they need in order to accelerate the growth of their business. And a supplier diversity program is a great way to help implement that disparity challenge.
Great. Well, I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up our presentation today. So, Doris and Belinda, I'd like to thank you both again for presenting and sharing all of this great information. I just want to remind everyone who's listening that we will be posting the recording and the slides and materials by the end of this week. If there are any questions that you have, please let me know after the webinar, and I'm happy to connect you with Doris and Belinda. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.